Welcome to the Inquiring Cat Does Politics, and today I'm going to tread into a specialist area, which is the question of diversity, equity and inclusion, DEI or DIE, D-I-E as some people prefer to call it, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around this subject and I have a little bit of inside knowledge on it, which I'm going to share with you. So President Trump has made his big announcement about removing trans people from the military. And I have in front of me from the Washington Post the article about that. And they believe there might be as many as 15,000 trans members of the military. And the interesting thing is that the new Defense Secretary has said that it's not appropriate for people who might have a mental health illness, thank you very much, for being in the military, because our job is lethality and readiness and war fighting. Well, I can't argue with the second part of that. However, I do argue with his point that transgender people should be avoided in the military. He said, Pete Hegseth says, being transgendered in the military causes complications and differences. Well, cast your mind back to the World War II, and I think that many people in Britain would have said exactly the same thing about homosexuals serving in the military, and indeed it was a criminal offence back then. But thanks to Alan Turing, we were able to make significant progress in accelerating the end of World War II. And had he been open about his sexuality at the time, I'm quite sure he would have been nowhere near the equipment he was working on that solved that problem for us. And of course, the idea that allowing homosexuals into the military would cause a complete collapse of discipline is absolute nonsense, because quite clearly they've been in the military now openly for quite a while in this country and others like South Africa and Australia, and it's caused no problems at all. So I think there's a lot of unconscious bias, or maybe even conscious bias, around this subject. And after all, what hypocrisy. We are only too happy to let homosexuals and transgender people, for that matter, fight to save the country in the wartime situation. So why should we suddenly cast them on the scrap heap just because peace has broken out? Well, we hope it's broken out. Of course, if peace was to disappear, which is seemingly quite possible in the modern world, we might be very glad to have all hands on deck, to use a good naval analogy. So on to the question of DEI itself. The problem starts with the word woke. So woke in its original meaning was an entirely virtuous concept of being socially and culturally aware of disadvantaged communities, very roughly. I'm not giving you the dictionary definition, but language evolves and woke has become a pejorative term that is slung around quite happily. I slung it around not long ago, and one of my friends said to me very judgmentally or critically, do you like going around insulting people? Well, I wasn't trying to insult people, I was referring to a phenomenon. And by the way, even The Guardian now refers to woke in a pejorative sense. So I think there's a lot of muddle gone on around this issue. And the trouble is that woke has got wrapped up with transgender activism, it's got wrapped up with gender ideologies and all the rest of it. And for the vast majority of people, they're frankly not that interested in it. They just want live and let live, and they don't want all this stuff rammed down their throats, which is why, as I have said in previous broadcasts, the left have only got themselves to blame in some regards when they lose out, because people are fed up with it and they walk away from it, and we're seeing that happen across Europe, however much they may like to deny it. But DEI done well is a good thing. So when I was working with one of the country's leading diversity, equity and inclusion consultancies, I asked the head of that practice to explain to me about DEI, and showed me a cartoon that many of you might have seen, which is of three people trying to look over a garden fence. and one of them can't look over the fence at all, one of them can just about get to eye level, and the third one on the biggest box is able to see clearly over the fence. And she explained this cartoon to me, and I'm not unintelligent. I do have a few O-levels to my name and a couple of A-levels and a lot of life experience, and I said to her, I have no idea what you're talking about, and I absolutely don't understand that cartoon at all. Give me a real-world example of where DEI has actually done some good. So she explained that they had worked with a law firm in London who had found that they were not getting very many of their black applicants through their selection process, and they wondered why. And so the consultancy did an audit of their whole recruitment process and found that where the black candidates were failing to score enough points in the application process was on some casework around, or some tests they did, examinations they did, around understandings of business. And so there was the business course that was catching all these people out. So what was then done was that there was a business studies course that every applicant, regardless of race or creed or colour, had to go through before they sat the entrance exams to this law firm. Once that had been done, the black applicants were suddenly much more successful than they had been previously. So when you look at DEI being exercised in that way, which was not about giving somebody a job that they're not actually qualified for. I mean, everyone loves to talk about, do you want to have a brain surgeon or a cardiac surgeon who's been allowed to qualify when they're not really up to the job or can't get the marks, but just because they're black? This is a trope. The fact of the matter is that DEI done well helps advance our communities to be representative of society as a whole, but does not have to mean at all any compromise on standards if it's done properly. But it's great gaslighting and a wonderful controversial subject that everyone likes to jump on because a lot of people, I think, out in the wider world just see it in the context of, it's people being given an unfair advantage. And if that was the case, I would be against it. But that is not the case, or doesn't have to be the case, although I'm sure there will be examples that some of my interlocutors are able to throw at me and say, well, what about this then, and what about that then? Well, yeah, quite right. If it's being done badly, it shouldn't be happening. But if it's being done well, it's a good thing. So I think that the American military are making a mistake. We know that a lot of big American corporates, apart from Apple, have immediately cancelled all their DEI policies in order to stay in favour. This shows you the level of, potentially you could say, political corruption in America. My only argument for disbanding DEI departments in an organisation would be that it should be fundamentally embedded in the management of every department. And hopefully we will get past the point, if we haven't already, when it's necessary to have dedicated DEI teams, because people should be trained as part of their overall training in an organisation as to the standards, behaviours that are expected within that organisation's culture. So don't write off DEI, don't have a knee-jerk reaction every time you hear it, just qualify it and investigate what people mean by it before writing it off. Hopefully that's of interest to you. And next week we have some more interesting material coming. So remember to like and subscribe for more of these political insights. And we have some guest speakers coming up, which will be terrific. Okay, thanks so much, and thanks for watching.